Hello! This story is part of a series titled Memories of Tehran. I remember my father as being someone who had very few friends. It was the summer of 1968 when he took us to his place of work, Tehran's Mehrabad Airport, to meet one of them. In 2010, as his time was coming to an end on this earth, I decided to ask him about it. Welcome to Storytime with Kumars. My name is Kayo Jijina, and this is my story titled Agha Leevon and the Willy'sjeep. I hope you enjoy it. It was a hot afternoon. Brother and I were off from school for the summer. The outside temperatures climbed well above the 38°C mark, or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and those who could spent the afternoon indoors. Dad had the weekend off, the weekend being Thursday and Friday. As was customary, Mom and Dad went down for their afternoon nap. Partway through, Dad emerged from the bedroom. There were a few things he wanted to take care of at work, and Brother and I were to join him. The maintenance hangar at Mehrabad Airport was not on my list of favorite places to go. It had to do with a prior experience. After arriving at the hangar, Dad had pointed to the spot where Brother and I were to wait for him. We were used to accompanying Dad on his errands. His standard line was, "Right here, boys. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Only 5 minutes." Dad never quite mastered the technique of timekeeping and always seemed to run a little behind schedule. As Brother and I wandered within a few meters of our designated spot, an American co-worker began yelling at us. "Get out! Get out! You don't belong here! Get out!" Being the oldest, I felt it was up to me to say something. Not sure where it came from, but partway through his tantrum, I responded with, "Dad told us to stand here and not move." It must have come as a huge surprise when I talked back in English, something he did not expect by looking at us. The man stopped yelling and in a composed voice asked, "What's your father's name?" "Daddy," came the response. Dad must have heard the commotion, because within a few minutes he magically appeared around the corner. It was none other than Houdini himself. "Ho ho ho! Yes, these are my sons." Or was it Santa? Dad's ho 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 might have had a hint of embarrassment for leaving us standing there unsupervised. Later, Dad explained the issue with theft of tools at the hangar and street kids and why we had been yelled at. Not to state the obvious, but if we had been street kids, with the language barrier, we would not have understood a word he said. However, this time Dad had not brought us to the airport to get yelled at so he could call his co-worker a hoe 3 times. Instead, there was someone he wanted us to meet. The man's name was Agha Leevon, and we were not to joke about it. Agha meaning Mr. and Leevon meaning glass or cup, as in Mr. Glass. In those days, introductions between young people and their elders were limited to Mr. or Mrs. and a last name. Agha Leevon was of average height, thin, and an unassuming gentleman with dark hair, mustache, and dark skin that came from working out in the sun all day. He was dressed in gray overalls, like the type Dad wore when he worked on the cars at home. Most people wore black shoes to work. Wearing sneakers or something casual would have been a sign of disrespect. As was customary, we shook hands and exchanged greetings with a salam. The younger of the two, that being me, offering a slight bow and downward tilting of the head to the elder. After the introductions, Dad told us we would be going for a drive in Agha Leevon's newly acquired Jeep. He stressed that it was not an ordinary Jeep, but a Willy'sjeep. The Jeep was an old-style military vehicle with no seat belts. and pendulous springs that teeter-tottered as he drove. The four of us loaded up and prepared for the ride. I imagined swerving in and out of traffic, jockeying at traffic lights as we drove through the streets of Tehran. Instead, Agha Leevon started the engine, shifted into gear, and headed in the opposite direction. He pulled onto the tarmac. Since it was Friday, everything was quiet. There were no airplanes taxiing on the runway for takeoff or landing. Most of the mechanics and management types had the day off. The place felt abandoned. As we drove up and down the runway, I held on tight to my seat. With great precision, he executed several loop-to-loop turns around parked airplanes. The afternoon temperatures felt like driving through an ocean current in slow motion. Driving 50 kilometers per hour felt like 20. Eventually, Agha Leevon returned to where we had parked. Dad, brother, and I got out. After a few words were exchanged between Agha Leevon and Dad looked at me.
"Son, would you like to go for a drive in the Jeep with Agha Leevon?"
"You don't even have to ask," came the inner voice as I bellowed out a great big yes. Agha Leevon spoke only Persian, and I had no trouble communicating in the language and understood him perfectly well. He had me climb in between his legs, so I was in between the driver's seat and the steering wheel. In those older cars, there was plenty of room to sit in that way. The starter switch was located under the gas pedal. To start the car, you had to turn the key to the on position and push the pedal all the way down, holding it flat until the engine fired. It took all the strength I had to step down on the gas pedal and engage the starter switch. I used the large steel steering wheel as leverage while holding my breath. On the second try, the car started. Agha Leevon managed the gas and brakes as I got the wheel. Anytime it felt like I was getting too close for comfort to an airplane, he would make the necessary adjustments to my steering, eventually pulling us off the tarmac and back to the parking spot where brother waited for his turn. Fast forward to a weekend in June of 2010. Dad had very few friends, and Agha Leevon had been one of them. I decided to ask Dad about their friendship. Agha Leevon had also joined us on a family fishing trip to Karaj and offered me my first slice of raw tomato, which I graciously declined.
"Well, son,"
said Dad in a slow, contemplative manner,
"he was an honest and hard-working fellow, an entry-level mechanic with Iran Air, a poor person without much of an education. The people in charge back then were stupid. If you were an American or a European, to their way of thinking, you must be very smart and highly educated, and they placed you in the top pay grade. People like me and Mr. Faruqi, who were well educated and had been with Iran Air since the beginning, we were in the middle pay grade. Then you had local people, Iranians like Agha Leevon. They paid them barely anything at all. Even the secretary we had, she was very good, but we had to pay her from our salaries. Iran Air told us we had to hire her but contributed nothing towards her." Dad paused for a moment before continuing. "There was no such thing as credit cards or loans. If you needed money, you saved or went to your family and friends to borrow. Working with him, I got to know him quite well. He did the dirtiest of jobs and would stay until the work was finished. The poor man had no car. He took the bus or walked everywhere he went. Then one day, I heard about this car for sale. It needed some engine work and some paint. So I told him, 'Look, you need a car. Let's go see it. If you like it, we can talk.' He liked it, and I gave him the money so he could have enough to buy it. The car was not that much, but for someone like him, it would have taken a long time to save. Sometimes I would go in on the weekend or stay late after work, and we would work on his car to get it running. We did the same thing when we got our Jeep.
Taking you for a drive in his Jeep was his way of saying thank you. Simple, but nice.